Hi there, it's Florence here, and today I'm back again with another episode of my knitting video podcast. Today I've not tied up my hair. We'll see if it touches the microphone. I believe I can film good audio on the first attempt this time. Anyway, it's been about 3 weeks, or a little over 3 weeks since my last episode, so I have got quite a lot to go through. I have 2 finished objects, a garment and an accessory, and then I have a bunch of stuff that I'm currently working on. And then on top of that, I have actually bought a bunch of yarn recently, which I will show towards the end of the episode. Oh, actually, I was about to jump into it, but before I start, I should talk briefly about what I'm wearing. This is the May Ball Wrap, which is a cardigan that I knitted almost a year ago now, actually. If you know my designs and you've seen my work before, you might know that I've released a pattern in the past called the Robinson Wrap cardigan, and this does look a little bit similar to it. I have had some questions about what the difference is between the May Ball Wrap, which I'm wearing today, and the Robinson Wrap cardigan, which I've previously released a pattern for. This is a much more relaxed fit. It's a little bit oversized. The gauge is different. This is like a 20 stitch gauge, so you can use a little bit of a heavier DK weight. I used a sort of heavier fingering weight plus mohair. This is knitted in the majo garn, fine merino I think it's called, and pearl mohair. The merino is the colour vanilla and the mohair is the cream one. I want to say it's called ivory. This one also has a little bit of a drop shoulder construction, although there is still short row shaping at the top of the sleeves. And the Robinson Wrap is like a raglan-ish thing. It uses different rates of increases for the body and for the sleeves, but it is still a raglan. And finally, this one has double knitted ties. I'll stand up so you can maybe see a little better. It has double knitted edges, but it also has double knitted ties at the bottom. Anyway, I've been wearing this cardigan so much recently, and I never wrote a pattern for it. I guess I thought it might be too similar to the Robinson Wrap for people to be interested in it, but I decided I'm just going to go ahead and work on a pattern for it anyway. I opened the call for testers a couple of days ago. I will have it linked in the description. I do get a lot of questions about how you can test knit some of my patterns, so if you're interested, there will be a sign up sheet form linked in the description. I will say that some sizes are particularly over applied for. Generally the sizes closest to my own anyway, maybe like sizes B, C and D. I'll have like 100 applications for each size a lot of the time, and I'm only going to pick 1 or 2 people. So yeah, I would really particularly value your help if you're a larger size or even the smallest size. Obviously feel free to apply if you're any size, but please don't be discouraged if I don't pick you. I get rejected from test knits all the time as well. It is what it is. Okay, I will move on to talk about my first finished object. I think I said in the last episode that I would have this done for this episode. This is the Seline sweater by Anne Wenzel. Before I get into this, I will say this is an ad. The yarn was sponsored. The yarn was sent to me by the yarn shop My Ivory Room, which is based in London. I'm not paid to talk about it or anything, but the yarn was gifted. So I knitted this jumper as part of a knit-along. For those of you who didn't watch the previous episode where I spoke a little bit about it, Anne Wenzel is a very popular knitwear designer who was recently diagnosed with cancer, and so in support for her, a lot of people have been knitting this particular pattern, the Seline, which I think is her like newest garment release, as part of a knit-along, just to, I guess, show that they're all behind her, show support. And also, well, we're all buying the pattern, so she gets like £6 of my money, I don't know. This is a colourwork round yoke jumper. It does come in 2 versions. This is the Seline. There's also one just called the Selena, whatever it's called. And that one is a smaller gauge. It's not as chunky, but it's also got much more of a sort of classic jumper fit. This thing is very oversized with a very deep yoke. It's definitely a throw it on at home over your loungewear kind of piece, rather than something you'd wear to a fancy event, put it that way. I'll try to cover everything I want to say systematically. I guess I'll start with the yarn. So this yarn was gifted. It is the yarn that I think is suggested in the pattern, or at least this one is. This is Gepard Puno. It is a blow yarn, 68% baby alpaca, 10% fine merino, 22% PA for the net. So it's fibres blown through a net, I suppose. The gauge says 11 to 14 stitches. You can knit it at a much tighter gauge than that for sure. And there's 110 meters per 50 grams. I want to say that I used 7 of these. I'll have to double check that, but I think I asked for the amount that was written in the pattern. I ended up having one full ball left over. And then I did hold it with mohair. I think I got 5 of the mohair, and for the mohair I just used Knitting for Olive. They have a lot of colour options, so it was really easy to find one that paired really nicely with my main colour, and Valentina, who owns the yarn shop, was really helpful going through all of the mohair that she had in stock and picking one out that matched. I was saying I really like how this is somewhere between a beige and a grey, and so it made me very happy that this sort of preserved that. I feel like a colour like this could look a lot more grey if you pair it with a grey mohair, or look a lot more beige if you pair it with a beige mohair, and this is, even though it's perhaps a little bit paler, a colour with very similar undertones. So yes, I held the main colour with mohair, but for the contrast colours, I think I used 3 contrast colours. I just used the puno on its own rather than getting 3 more colours of mohair as well. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the performance of the yarn. I found it to be a real pleasure to knit. It has very little stitch definition, but I kind of like that because it looks almost like the colourwork is like painted on rather than being knitted into the piece, if you know what I mean. Like it's just smooth fabric without super visible stitches, and then it has this design on it. I think it's a really cool look for this sort of piece, and that's particularly the case for this slightly lower contrast colourwork between this beige and the dark grey. All of the colours have numbers. I'll put all the numbers in the description. In fact, as usual, all of the patterns, designers, yarn colours, it's all in the description because I often forget colour numbers and stuff while I'm talking in the video. So yes, I really enjoy how colourwork looks with this particular yarn combination, and I didn't find it was difficult at all. The yarn does have a couple of places where it becomes quite thick. I'll see if I can spot it. Oh yeah, here for example. So I don't know if you can see, I don't know if it's focusing, but you can see that there's a sort of bobbly bit in the puno right here that's left a sort of bobble on the jumper. And because this yarn is a blow yarn, it's not something where you can super easily splice ends together, so it's kind of annoying to cut those bits out. I just left them in there, but if it's something that bothers you, you might want to keep it in mind if you're choosing this yarn. Actually, with that being said, I did just splice the ends together when I joined a new ball of yarn. I didn't cut the yarn down or anything, I just got the 2 ends, put them together, added a little water, rubbed them together. And I can't tell where I joined new balls of yarn, and it isn't falling to pieces. I do feel more peace of mind if I'm splicing together yarn that really shouldn't be spliced together, if it's being held with mohair, because I feel like the mohair will stop everything from unraveling anyway. But as long as the join section is long enough that the end is sort of functionally woven in, I feel like it's probably fine. I don't like doing as I'm told. I will splice together superwash sock yarn, blow yarn, all kinds of things that you really shouldn't splice together. Chainette yarn, I've done that. I believe, and it kind of works. Okay, talk about the pattern. This is a really well written pattern. I spoke about it before. The chart is super clear and easy to read. Something that I liked about the chart is that it includes instructions for which colour to hold dominant for each row. If you haven't knitted a lot of colourwork before, if you're more of a beginner knitter. I always talk about these things even though I know that a lot of my audience has probably knitted a lot more colourwork than me, just because I think I learned a lot of what I know about this sort of thing from watching podcasters and hearing them speak about it. When you're knitting colourwork, well, I knit my colourwork 2-handed, so I'll hold 1 strand continental and 1 strand English. And depending on which hand you hold your yarn in, or I guess if you knit with 2 strands continental, which way round you hold them, one of the colours gets a little bit more yarn in its stitch than the other one will, and that one therefore ends up with the stitches looking a little bit bigger and it's held dominant. Normally you just will hold the contrast colour dominant, or at least that's what I do. But this actually has you switch during some rows to get the points of the zigzags to look sort of the most similar. Like here, I don't remember which colour you hold dominant, but you'll hold one colour dominant, and then here where you have a point in the other colour, you hold the other colour dominant. And I really think that that sort of exemplifies the attention to detail that I found within this pattern. It does have short row shaping. There is short row shaping after the colourwork, but before dividing body and sleeves. I think that's my favourite place that colourwork can go, in a round yoke colourwork jumper, so I'm super happy about that. The jumper comes in 2 lengths, and I guess I just knitted close to the short length, although I didn't actually measure it. But the longer length also has a second set of short rows that are suggested that I think give more of a curved hem. So if that's something that's your style, that's included in the pattern as well. Modifications that I made, I went down 2 needle sizes, I think, for this collar. So I think you if I remember correctly, do the colourwork on a 5.5mm needle and the rest of the stockinette on a 5mm needle. I think I did this collar on a 4mm needle, and the pattern tells you to do a 5mm needle, so basically it's telling you not to go down a needle size to do the rib. That is supposed to give you like a really roomy, cozy collar. I didn't want that, and so I just went down a couple of needle sizes. It does fit over my head, but it's definitely like something you have to pull. So I don't know, maybe if you're knitting it 4.5mm might be the way to go. I think I used a 4.5mm needle to do the rib on the bottom and on the sleeves. Also, I did shorten the yoke. I normally wear a coat when I go outside, and a jumper with a very long yoke doesn't fit particularly well under a coat or a jacket, because it all sort of bunches up and then the body gets shorter and the sleeves get shorter, and I find that really annoying. To be honest, this is still a challenge to put on underneath something like that, but I think I probably took about 3 centimeters out of the yoke depth. And to do that, anytime I had a bunch of plain stockinette rounds in one colour, I just sort of knitted 1 or 2 fewer rounds. For example, I guess probably in between these colourwork motifs here. And also underneath the bottom of the colourwork, it tells you to knit a bunch of rounds in stockinette, and I think I did slightly fewer. So yeah, if you don't want a very dramatic silhouette, or if you think that you're going to wear this jumper out with something else over the top, that's a modification that I would really recommend. Maybe try and take out even more than I did, I don't know. Of course, if you are going to be wearing this as sort of everyday jumper out of the house, then maybe the regular Seline pattern is better than the super Seline. It's up to you. Anyway, I think that's everything that I wanted to say about this. I think those are all of the modifications that I made. Yarn is lovely, pattern is really good. I would definitely knit another Anne Wenzel pattern again, and there are a few that I have my eye on. I think I mentioned in the last video she has some cushion patterns with slip stitches knitted in Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool. I'll put a picture here. They're really cute. I really would like to make them. Maybe with like sandnes garn pig in so they wear a little bit better. That would require some gauge swatching. But yes, this is a big success and something that I really enjoyed making. Oh, it is also incredibly soft. If you are sensitive to wool, I really recommend the Puno. It's totally non-scratchy, even as somebody who is a tiny bit sensitive to alpaca sometimes. Okay, so I have a second finished object. Annoyingly enough, I do not have it with me because I meant to film this video last Friday. When I went to film it, my camera was dead, so I couldn't, and then I was away over the weekend, and now it's Tuesday. And over the weekend, I gave my other finished object away. I gave it to my sister for her birthday, and I asked her to send me pictures of it, and she has really done a great job. So I can put a picture right here. I particularly wanted to have pictures because this is, I think, not even something that was a work in progress. I don't even think I had the yarn in the last video. So it's a completely new finished object to show her. This is, I was going to say the Weekend hat by petiteknit. It's more of a week slow hat, Oskend hat. It's a combination of the Weekend and Oslo hats from petiteknit. So my original game plan for this was just to make the Weekend hat. My sister, she does knit, but she doesn't have a lot of free time. She's a particularly studious student. She knitted a hat a year and a bit ago and ended up leaving it at the boathouse and lost it. So she asked for a new hat for her birthday, and I mean, I can knit a hat pretty fast, so I agreed to. She sent me some inspo pictures and they're all quite colourful. So firstly, I did have to go on a dedicated trip to the Oxford yarn store to pick up some yarn. All of my sort of scrap yarn or small quantities is beige or grey, maybe a pale blue at a push, and she wanted colours. So I did actually go buy more pale blue. I do have a spare ball of this somewhere, but I don't know where it is, so this is all I have. And I got this red as well, and I decided I was going to do stripes. Okay, so these are gynt from Sandnes garn. This is maybe my favourite yarn right now. And I think I'm definitely not alone in this. This is pretty much sold out at my local yarn shop. It's a 100% Norwegian wool, I think. DK weight, although definitely a slightly thicker DK weight. Not too scratchy. I don't find it bothers me at all, although if you're sensitive to wool, you might have some problems with it. And it comes in loads of really fun colours. Also, I think petiteknit has released a bunch of collaboration colourways with Sandnes garn recently, and so she's been releasing a lot of patterns using this yarn, which has only increased its popularity. I have quite a few jumpers knitted in this, going back a couple of years now, and I think what I found is it wears really well. Even if you wear the jumper every day, it doesn't pill that much, and it's obviously super easy to shave or whatever if it does start to pill. So it's just a really good, reliable, and affordable. I forgot to mention this stuff is really cheap. Probably like £3 something or maybe £4 a ball in the UK. It's really good. To be honest, I don't know how my sister is with wool and like how bothered she is by woolly wool. Maybe the Sandnes double Sunday would have been a better option, but this is what she got. I am going to look up the colours for this one. This is 6035 and the red is 4228, I think. This is just a really red. I don't know what more to say about it. If you're wanting to knit a red jumper, I think this would be great. And then this, it's blue, but I don't know if you can see it all. I feel like a early 2010s beauty guru. It is a tweed yarn and it has little tweed flecks in it in red, but also yellow and green and dark blue. So I thought that the red tweed flecks and this tied in really nicely with this red. And so yeah, it's a predominantly blue hat with red stripes. So the hat fusion thing. I might do a diagram to try and explain what I mean. The weekend hat is pretty simple. It's a big ribbed tube and then you do decreases towards the end and then you sort of fold the ribbed part up to make a triple thickness brim. And to help the fold, there are some clever sort of double knitted fold lines that you add. They're included on a lot of collars in patterns like the Moby sweater, one of the newer My Favourite Things knitwear patterns at least. Loads of patterns have it, just a little double knitted detail to help create a fold line on rib. I did take a picture before I folded it, so you can see the fold line. I will put it here. You can see you sort of do 2 rounds of only the knit stitches in the rib, and then 1 round of only the purl stitches. And so there's more fabric on the knit stitch side than on the purl stitch side, and it encourages it to fold. I don't know if that's poorly worded, best I can do right now. Basically, I think you can probably envision though, and again I'll put a little drawing here to demonstrate. The thing about a hat like this is it relies on rib not really having a wrong side. So on the finished hat, some parts will have the right side visible and some parts will have the wrong side visible. And this is all fine and good unless you're doing something else that causes your knitting to have a wrong side, which for me is stripes. So since this is knitted in the round and I'm doing stripes, I did jogless jogs. I did the kind where you just knit into the row below on the first round after you change colour. I'm sure if you look up videos of jogless jog methods, you will find it. This is basically to try and mitigate that thing where if you change colour, because you're knitting in a spiral, you get a little step at the point where you change colour. And these jogless jogs do have a right side and a wrong side. Now I'm sure I could figure out like which parts of the tube are going to be showing as the right side and which parts will have the wrong side showing, and I'm sure I could figure out how to do jogless jogs so that they look good from the wrong side. But here's the thing, I've knitted a lot of petiteknit Oslo hats, and that is a stockinette hat, and so it uses a slightly different strategy. Because stockinette has a wrong side, after you knit the brim and you fold it, you do a single German short row turn so that the wrong side becomes the right side and the right side becomes the wrong side, and then you carry on. And I just decided to do that. So I knitted the brim, you sort of knit up and then back down, and then there's another fold up. And then I did a single German short row turn so that the inside became the outside and the outside became the inside, and then I carried on. That's a terrible description, but yes. Other than that, I think I made the second largest size, I want to say. I used the needle size specified in the pattern. I followed all of the instructions for the weekend hat, although I did knit my live stitches together with the cast on edge to sort of force the fold to stay in place. That's another thing that happens in the Oslo hat pattern and not in the weekend hat pattern. I figured if I was making a wee slow hat anyway, I may as well commit to it and incorporate all of the elements I like from the Oslo hat. And yeah, I'm really happy with the result of this hat. It looks really good, it makes a really great gift, and I think she seemed to be happy with it. Okay, so that is all I have to say about that project. It was a smaller and I guess fairly simple project. And I will now move on to talking about some of the pieces that I'm currently working on. First of all, this thing. So this has been in quite a few episodes because I have been taking my time with it. It's a cabled jumper, and cable jumpers just take quite a while, and I don't want to stop it from being fun by forcing myself to knit on it all the time. This was also put on hold while I finished off a couple of other things I had to get done in January. I I was doing a test knit for Ullin Knitwear, which was also another cable jumper, as well as that Seline, Super Seline sweater for the knit along. And so this was left on hold during that time, and I've now picked it up and started making progress on it again. Once again, before we get started, the yarn for this was sponsored. Again, this was gifted to me by Valentina of My Ivory Room. This is the Gepard Purlana and Gepard Kidzetta. This is a 50% wool, 50% alpaca DK weight, and then this is just a regular silk mohair. And the colours that I have are 106 for the Purlana and 104 for the mohair. I don't know how well the colour shows up on camera. It's a kind of lilac grey, somewhere in between purple and grey, both for the wool and the mohair. They look really beautiful together. Anyway, I was gifted that yarn some time ago when I went to Valentina's shop and I was picking out stuff that interested me, and I wasn't sure at the time what to knit with it, and I later found that this pattern that I've had my eye on for a long time uses the Purlana, although I think it holds that with like a lace-weight alpaca or a lace-weight cashmere, something that's not fluffy, but the gauge shouldn't be too different with mohair, so I decided to go for it. The pattern is the Waffle Loop Sweater by Other Loops, and it is a cabled jumper where the cables only appear in a rectangular panel on the front and on the back. The rest of the jumper has this waffle stitch, I think she calls it, this texture, which is really easy and quite mindless to knit. I think it makes it almost a little bit more of a beginner-friendly cable jumper, because when you're doing stuff like shaping the shoulders or whatever, you don't have to worry about also doing the cables. They really just happen later on once you've already got into the swing of things. So in the last episode where I showed this jumper, I think I'd started the back panel. I'd sort of got down just to where the cable started on the back panel, and I hadn't started the front panel yet. So I have now made quite a lot of progress. I picked up stitches for the front along the shoulders, and I knitted the front, and then I joined the front and back underneath the arm, and I'm now just working on the body. This thing is a lot of knitting. It is quite slow. I guess I'll start off by talking briefly about the yarn. There's not that much to say about it. The wool alpaca I really like. I feel like it has a lot of the benefits of knitting with a wool and also a lot of the benefits of knitting with alpaca. It is less floppy than it would be if it was just alpaca, but it still feels super soft and has that alpaca-ish texture to it. Again, I can be sensitive to alpaca. This doesn't bother me at all. The mohair, I don't know, it's silk mohair. It's pretty nice. I think it's comparable to other mohair of a similar price point, like the Knitting for Olive or the Izia. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I'm really happy with both. They look good. That's about all I have to say about that. The pattern I have been really impressed by. So I will say the sizing is not the best. I believe this pattern, I will double check this before I post, has 3 sizes, and I'm making the smallest size. This thing is still huge. It's really big. It's going to be a very relaxed fit, and I guess I just wish there were more sizes on both ends of the spectrum. I'm not a particularly small person, but I think a lot of these designers like to add a lot of positive ease, maybe slightly more than I would generally choose to have. And it would just be nicer to have options, you know? Other than the sizing though, I think this is an excellent pattern. It's the second time I've knitted something by Other Loops. The first Other Loops pattern I followed was for the twist loop top, which is a really beautiful summer top camisole thing with like a cable down the front. You've probably seen me wearing it a bunch on this channel. It's one of my favourite, if not my favourite, summer tops that I've knitted. I just think that the designs are really clever and have really great attention to detail in them. Like there's a lot going on here. There's waffle stitch, there's shaping, there are a lot of cables, and yet everything has a lot of thought put into it. I find that with cable jumpers in particular, a lot of cable jumpers sort of skimp out on like having good shaping or a thoughtful fit because all of the complexity is in the cables, and that makes it more difficult to get a precise fit. But the waffle texture means that it's not so much of an issue here, and there are just shaping details that I really enjoy. Like I love the armhole shaping on this one. And as a design point, I really like that you have this rib that travels along the shoulder, I don't know if you can see, and then travels along the edge of the armhole, and then it carries on underneath the arm all the way to the bottom of the jumper. The pattern is super well written and clear. I don't think I've had any issues with typos or errors in it so far. And yeah, I guess I would just totally reach for another Other Loops pattern again. She releases so many and they're all really beautiful. She has like, I guess my favourite style out of any knitwear pattern writer, designer. This actually has a matching skirt as well. So if you would like to knit a matching jumper skirt set, I feel like it's somehow less of a daunting process than knitting a dress, but it still gives you the same look and it's way more versatile because you can wear the pieces separately as well. So yeah, if you're interested in such a thing, do check it out. I might be wrong, but I think there's also another version of this jumper without the cables that's just waffle stitch all over. Yeah, a lot of options. I have so many colourful stitch markers on this one. Oh yeah, I will also say it's actually surprisingly mindless. It very much gives the impression of being a cable jumper, but there really aren't that many cables. There are a bunch of these like squiggly ones, which are really easy. You just cable every 4th row. And then there's one big one on either side, like this. And that's it. So you only have to do cables every 4th row. I've only actually used a cable needle for the big one. I never use a cable needle for these small squiggly ones. And to be honest, if you're good at knitting without cable needles, you could probably do the big one without a cable needle as well. It's just, I mean, it's not the end of the world for me to use a cable needle for 4 cables every 12 rounds. Oh yeah, I will say this has been a little bit more of a process than it needs to be, simply because I left this project to hibernate for so long. Because I didn't knit on it for probably a month or so, between knitting the front and the back, I ended up starting the front cabled panel feeling a lot of confidence because I'd already started the back one. Probably too much confidence because I didn't really read the pattern and I didn't actually remember quite what I was doing. So I ended up making, I don't know if you can see, you have these sort of pairs of squiggly cables. So there's a pair here and a pair here, and they're offset. So like there's one here, then one there, then one there. So on a cable round, one of these sets will go out and then the other set will go in and they alternate. I didn't do that when I started the front, and I managed to knit like a chunk of the cable section at the front without realizing that every other one of my sets of squiggly cables had been cabled in the wrong direction. So I ended up having to like ladder down and remove the entire cable and then reassemble the whole thing. So I was doing proper cable surgery on like 4 cables, but it worked out. I can't tell now. I was a little bit worried about the tension looking dodgy, but I don't think it's a problem. Yeah, it's a really time-consuming knit. I think I will make sure I have some other things going at the same time, but I am enjoying it a lot, and it doesn't require as much focus as I thought it would. Okay, so this other work in progress, I think also wasn't in the last video. I've clearly been knitting a lot since the last episode. Well, I mean, this was kind of in the last video. So I spoke a lot in the last video about how I wanted to knit some mittens. I think I showed a cuff that I knitted. The pattern is Vic Varvet by Seline. And when you see this mitten, you may notice that this is not the mitten that I showed in the last video. This is actually Vic Varvet Take 3. So I have a problem with these knitting patterns for mittens, which is that my hands are huge. I talk about this all the time. I have really big hands, and so women's size mitten patterns don't fit me. And I really thought when I cast these on for the first time that I could probably make it work, that maybe they'd be a little bit tighter, but it would be fine. It wasn't fine. You know, I knitted them a bit. The colourwork doesn't have as much stretch to it as stockinette would, obviously. It looks really dodgy when you try and stretch colourwork. And so they were not looking great, and I ended up giving up on them. So these are fingering weight mittens. I was using at the time knitting for Olive Merino, a fingering weight yarn. And so I ended up having to do an emergency trip to the yarn shop. Thank you, the Woolhound in Oxford Covered Market, for being there for me. I paid for the yarn myself, of course. I managed to get my hands on some DK at very short notice because I was going away for the weekend and I wanted something to work on. And I ended up buying this. So this is BC Garn Loch Lomond. If this is familiar, it might be because I've used this yarn before. In fact, I've used this grey one very recently. Was it the last episode that I showed my zipper sweater light man that I knitted for my boyfriend? I think so. But that's knitted entirely in this light grey BC Garn Loch Lomond, held with Izzy Alpaca 1. For this, I'm just using the Loch Lomond on its own in 2 colours. The colours will be in the description, but this is a pale grey. I want to say it's colour 6 silver. See, I know that because I used it for a big project not that long ago. And this is a dark brown with sort of blue tweed flecks in it. The colour name will be in the description. So, yeah, my second attempt, because I had gone away for the weekend, I ended up trying to knit the entire mitten, including the cuff, on 3mm needles. And that turned out to also be a mistake because obviously you're supposed to go down a size for ribbing. I thought I could get away with it, but it left the cuff looking super bulky. And so I ended up frogging that again. And then on my third attempt, which I have here, I used a 2.5mm needle for the cuff and a 3mm needle for the rest of the glove. And this pretty much works for me. So the combination of keeping the needle size the same, but going up to what is, I guess, kind of a heavy DK weight yarn. I mean, I think the packaging for this suggests you knit it up to an 18 stitch gauge. So much thicker than fingering weight, to say the least. That combination kind of works for me. So the mitten fits my hand. It still is totally stretched right here though. I mean, when I'm holding my hand like this, it's not such a problem, but I don't think it looks that great when I extend my thumb. I'm not going back to knit these a fourth time though. I'm just doing my best with what I have. I'm just going to power on, get these mittens done, and maybe I can do a better job on a second pair at some later date. Anyway, these are really beautiful. I think I've kind of accepted I'm not going to have them done for the end of the winter. So these will be something that I'll wear next winter if the weather ever gets cold again, climate change and all. The pattern is really good. It has charts which are really self-explanatory. Like, there are written instructions. The written instructions don't serve as a substitute to the charts. It's sort of in addition to the charts. But to be honest, I've barely looked at the written instructions. You can kind of just look at the chart once you finish the cuff at least. Just follow the chart and you can basically finish the mitten like that. I think these would make a fairly good beginner colourwork project. This particular design does have some longer floats, so you do probably have to catch floats. I mean, I know some people don't like doing it, but I would find that with a mitten like this, I think my fingers would catch on the floats otherwise. So I've been catching floats if there's any floats longer than 3 stitches. And I think the design is quite unusual for this sort of style boot mitten. This floral pattern is not something you see very often. It's a little bit softer and less geometric, although it still has a very classic geometric pattern on the palm. I think they're really cute. I really can't wait to have them finished. Current status is this mitten is done and blocked. I just need to weave in ends. And with this mitten, I think I'm just about up to the point where I need to put stitches on hold for the thumb. So yeah, these should probably take 1 to 2 evenings of work to finish. And I'm excited to have them done even though I won't be able to wear them. Okay, so I think that's it for the current pieces I have in progress. I should probably cast some new things on, to be honest. But I do have a lot of yarn that I am going to show now. You can leave this video if that's not something you like looking at. I've showed all of my knitting, it's yarn time. Okay, so the first sweater quantity I bought isn't for me, so it doesn't count. I've been telling my dad for quite literally years that I'm going to knit him a jumper, and I've never done it. I'm a bad daughter. He wears a lot of non-super washable jumpers. He cares for them really well. He wears them till they fall to pieces. And I think he's just someone who would really appreciate the time and effort that goes into knitting. I really feel like he understands the value of hand knit pieces. So I have been going back and forth on what to knit him for a long time. Because it's a men's jumper, I feel like it has to be something that I feel enthusiastic about knitting myself, just because it's a lot of knitting to do. Men's jumpers just really drag on. I'm always surprised at how long the sleeves need to be and how long the body needs to be. It feels so slow compared to knitting even an oversized women's jumper. So I have been going back and forth on what to knit, and I eventually have settled on another petiteknit pattern. The previous knits I've done for men have all been petiteknit patterns, so I really feel confident about the fit. And I like using a pattern because I like having my hand held when I'm knitting for men, because I don't feel that confident figuring out measurements and stuff myself. So I'm going to make the Storm Sweater by petiteknit. I'll put a picture here. This is actually one that I totally would love to knit for myself. But I think I could also really enjoy the process of knitting it for someone else, and it's not like I have any pressing need to own more knitwear. And of course, I had to choose some yarn that I really love as well. So I spoke a lot earlier about how much I like sandnes garn gynt. I'm going to use this again. And this is a petiteknit collaboration colorway too. I forget what this color's called. The number is 6050. It's called Into the Clouds or something, I think. And I have this in the Sandnes Garn Sunday as well, because I wanted to make a summer top out of it. and now I have it in the piggynt too. This is like, if I was a yarn, I'd be this yarn. It's my colour, right? And I think my dad would totally enjoy it as well. He has a quite similar taste to me in a lot of ways. Actually, when I went into the Woolhound, which is a yarn shop in the Covered Market in Oxford, the woman who owns the shop, or I don't know, I guess she works there a lot, I don't know her at all, she was wearing the petiteknit storm sweater. I asked her and it wasn't this yarn, but it was like identical, same colour, and it looked so good. So I felt really reassured that I've made a good decision here. I feel like this colour is pale enough to show the texture, because there's a lot of texture and I don't want to go to all that effort, only to have it not be particularly visible. I worry a little bit that it's like a colour that's hard to pair with things, just because I feel like it doesn't look good with blue jeans, but my dad doesn't wear blue jeans that often, so I think it's fine. There was one flaw in me choosing this yarn, which is that the Oxford yarn store is like very low on stock in all colours of piggynt. And so I bought, I want to say 13 of these, and I think I'm going to need at least 15. So I'm going to be knitting some part of it with a different dye lot. Will I come to regret this? I don't know, maybe I should have waited until they have more in stock. I don't know, I feel like hand knits, maybe this is probably a hot take, but I feel like hand knits don't need to look store-bought. Like having a slightly different colour for a cuff or something just adds to the handmadeness of them and makes them more unique. And I feel like it's also something that knitters are way too critical of. Like, we've worked on these pieces and we know a lot about them, so we really notice these things, but I feel like most people probably won't notice if there's a slightly different dye lot for like the cuff. That's what I'm hoping. Like, I'm hoping that it will all be okay. On that note, if you have any spare balls in dye lot 118438, I will buy them off you, just in case. I will try my luck. Yeah, I love this yarn, I love the colour, and I think this is going to be a real joy to knit, even though it's huge. And I think that's really important if I'm ever going to get this jumper for him done. Actually, when I picked that yarn up, I was in the Oxford yarn store with my boyfriend, and he gifted me some yarn. I mean, I chose it, he just paid for it, so thank you, Cameron, if you're watching. I don't think he is, but yeah. He bought me 3 balls of this. This is Knitting for Olive Merino. The colour is Dusty Aqua. Again, this is my kind of colour. It's really pretty. I feel like in the summer, things don't have to be colours that pair well with jeans, because I wear a lot more like other fabrics, more skirts, or like white shorts, linen, things that aren't blue denim. And so this colour is still pretty wearable. I have a light blue knit camisole. I wear it all the time. I've never had problems styling it. I am hoping to design something with this. I do have some ideas for it. It's going to be a ribbed t-shirt, hopefully. Maybe there'll be more on that in the next episode. I'm kind of deciding what order I'm going to be starting to knit things. It's mid-February now, and it takes like at least 2 weeks for me to knit a piece, and then maybe 8 weeks to get it tested and to finish the pattern. So it's going to take at least 2.5 months from me planning a piece to having the pattern ready. And if I want people to be able to knit it in the early summer, which I guess is when most people start doing a lot of summer knitting, I really need to cast this on, like, now. So I think this might be my next cast on, we'll see. I'm really trying hard right now to be a better designer. Like, it's very much a hobby. I think some people misinterpret and like don't know that I have a full-time job. I mean, I do talk about it a bunch, but people who don't watch my podcast in full, and like I very much have a full-time job. Knitting is a hobby that thankfully pays for itself. But I really want to like be more professional and take more pride in my patterns and really make them the best they can be. And part of that being a good designer thing is releasing patterns in the season they're supposed to be released. So I'm really going to do my best this year to have winter patterns for winter, but also summer patterns for summer. I have still more, although not a lot more. I also went into the Oxford yarn store the weekend before and bought yarn for a summer top. To be honest, I didn't have so much of a plan for this. Summer yarn is just one of those things that I buy so frequently because I know that I can use it up. Like, it's not something that's going to sit and languish in my stash. Even if I decide later what pattern I'm going to knit, pretty much all the summer tops I knit use the same kind of weight of yarn. I mean, they're all fingering weight because that's what I find to be the most wearable in summer. And this is, I know, my favourite yarn to use for summer tops, Knitting for Olive Merino again. So I can really just have a few different colours ready to go in my stash, and then when I choose a pattern that I want to knit, I know it's there and I can always jump in and use it. So I actually got 2 different colours, and I'm thinking that I will maybe do something with stripes. If the worst comes to the worst, I could knit another of my own pattern, the Tombow tee. I'll put a picture here. It was probably my most worn top last summer. I really loved it. I think that would look cute in these colours. The colours, by the way, are marzipan for this sort of creamy grey beige. And this is navy blue. It's actually a really saturated blue. I guess in the store I might have thought it was more muted, but it's a very vibrant dark blue colour. I think if you're looking for a really classic navy, this colour might be something you really like. They look really good together. It's super high contrast. I really like stripes like this, so I'll see what ends up happening. No immediate plans, but it can go with my other couple of camisole quantities of fingering weight merino that I have in stash, and we'll see what lies in its future. And then I actually bought a couple of things that are not yarn as well, but which are definitely knitting related. I'll start off with these. I bought myself some new cables. I have bought a few. I don't know what it is. I feel like cables just disappear. I buy more and more, and then I always seem to be running out, and I don't know how it happens. But actually I just broke a cable for the first time. I use the Seeknit KA interchangeable needles. I do get a lot of questions about that. I got a set about 2.5 years ago, I think, and it's pretty much all I've used for my knitting ever since. I have 1 or 2 other things. I have like some fixed 3mm circulars that I use for camisoles, which are also from Seeknit, things like that. But for the most part, all of my knitting is done on these Seeknit KA interchangeable needles. And having had them for 2.5 years, I broke the first cable a few days ago, so they've done pretty well, I think. My favourite thing about them is that I can easily buy every component. So if I lose a needle, or if I break a cable, or if I decide I want another cable joining component, I can buy all of those individually, which is really cool. And Valentina, who has the yarn shop in my Ivory room, she stocks all of that stuff, which is great. So I needed to replace the cable that was broken, and I got a couple more at the same time. I'm never sure because they have like lengths on them, but they're not standard lengths, and I think they're lengths excluding the length of the needle. So normally I just buy an 80cm circular needle. I think the 55cm cable gives me a roughly 80cm full circular needle. Anyway, I got 2 of what I hope are 80cm, including the needles, cables. These Seeknit KA interchangeable needles have different joint sizes. So these ones work for a 3.5 up to a 5mm needle. I also got one longer one. This is a 75cm cable, so maybe it's like 100cm-ish, including the needles. And then I got one more of those, but with the smaller joint size. So this will work for my 2.5mm and 3mm interchangeable needles. You'd think it's kind of a pain having a lot of different cables with different joint sizes, but I have a little organizer for them in my needle case, and I don't find that it particularly bothers me. But yeah, I figured it would probably work really well for magic loop in case I want to use those for gloves or something. The other non-yarn thing that I bought was kind of an impulse purchase. So I was in the Woolhound, which I've now mentioned like 4 times in this video. I do a lot of promotion for my favourite yarn shops. I went in, none of the yarn was super speaking to me on that day, so I left. And as I was leaving, I saw this in the window, and I ended up going right back in and buying it. This is another petiteknit project bag. I do have one of these already, I'll show you. So this is one that I bought from petiteknit's website, probably about a year ago, just under a year ago maybe. Or is it 2 years ago? I wouldn't know. Anyway, this is my only project bag, or it was my only project bag up until this point. I know it's kind of surprising, I knit a lot, I have a lot of yarn, I have a lot of needles, I have only one project bag. And to be honest, I could really use another. I really liked this one. I found it's worked super well for me. This is the standard size petiteknit bucket bag. The only thing is the knots on these drawstrings do undo sometimes, so I've like tied them myself and they look a little bit messy. But other than that, I really like them. And petiteknit basically just releases these in one color at a time, and you can grab it if it's a color that speaks to you. So this blue floral one was totally my kind of color. And recently she's released this one, which is also blue floral, and so I did end up getting it. I will say these two feel quite different. I was wondering if it was just because this one is a lot older than this one, but it is a lot softer, and I think the fabric is quite different. This is much thicker and has more of a quilted feel. So I definitely say it feels like the newer bag is slightly lower quality than the old one. The ties were these sort of cord rope ties, and now they're made of the same cotton as the bag. I still think this feels like a reasonably high quality bag. Like, I don't particularly have complaints, if not for the fact I'm holding the two side by side and this one totally feels better. These things are pretty pricey. I paid £53 for this. They are cheaper if you buy them directly from petiteknit, but then obviously you have to pay for shipping from Denmark or whatever. And I find that this standard sized one can hold a full sweater quantity of yarn or a jumper just fine. It does come in a bigger size if that's something that interests you, but yeah, this size has been great. I'm super happy to have two of them now. I feel like having two projects on the go at once is sort of a happy place for me. I like to be able to switch between them so that I don't get bored of anything, but I don't like having an overwhelming amount of projects that I'm prioritizing at once. And so having two project bags for my two projects will hopefully lead to me leaving less yarn on all the surfaces in my flat. I think it's a pretty good purchase, and I'm really happy with it. Okay, so I think that's everything for this video. New yarn, new items, all of my work in progress pieces, and my two finished objects. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed me rambling for like 45 minutes. I feel like this will actually be a shorter episode, which is weird because I feel like I had a lot of stuff to go through. But I'll be back in soon with another episode. Soon I'll be back in with another cardigan tutorial, which I'm kind of excited about. Goodbye.